I tell the question first in Spanish and then in English, and you can answer. Okay?
Sounds good.
Hoy estamos hablando con Keith Farrell, instructor de la Liverpool HEMA y de la Academy of Historical Arts. Today we are talking to Keith Farrell, instructor of Liverpool HEMA and Academy of Historical Arts. I am glad to meet you, Farrell. Again, how are you?
I'm keeping very well, thank you.
Me gustaría primero saber cuándo descubriste las artes marciales históricas europeas. I would like to know how and when do you discover the historical European martial arts?
I first came across it in 2008 when I was at Glasgow University. I saw there was a club in the university grounds, and they were playing with swords, and so I signed up. I wouldn't say that I started doing HEMA until about 2010. There were a couple of years where we were just sort of playing with swords, but it was around 2010 when I started doing it properly, and that's kind of when I would say that I started doing HEMA.
Vemos que tienes un bagaje en artes marciales orientales. ¿Crees que la HEMA es muy distinta? You have a background in Oriental martial arts. Do you think in general HEMA is very different?
I do have a background in karate, and I do think HEMA is different in many ways. It has a lot of similarities, certainly. Most martial arts have similarities, but I think there are a lot of quite important differences between karate and HEMA, not least of which is we have more swords.
More kind of them, yeah.
Yes.
Hace unos años te fuiste de Glasgow a Liverpool. Fue muy difícil volver a empezar con un grupo nuevo. Some years ago, you moved from Glasgow to Liverpool. It was so difficult to start again and form a new fencing group?
Not particularly. I found it quite easy, actually. When I was in Glasgow, I had set up a number of different clubs, or at least been involved in running them. And when I moved down here, I already had a good idea of what sort of things I should be doing and what sort of mistakes I should avoid making. So I was able to do it well from the very beginning. I knew what I wanted to achieve with it as well. So I was able to set up my ideal club quite easily.
What is your ideal club, more or less?
People who are interested in training HEMA as a martial art, and who are interested in the history and everything behind it. Of course, everyone has a different perspective on what they like about HEMA, and my ideal was to have a club of people who liked the same sort of thing as me. Mm-hmm. Because then we'd all be able to enjoy doing the same sorts of things, we'd be able to go deep into those topics, and we'd all enjoy it. I thought that would be a good basis for a club.
Yeah. You found a lot of clubs, as you said. Maybe you could say some tips to grow up the clubs or meet people interested in sports.
Well, I think one of the most important bits of advice I could offer is to have a good understanding of what you want to achieve with the club. If you don't quite know what that is, it's going to be difficult to attract people with your vision because you don't have one. Mm-hmm, yeah. If you know what you want to achieve with the club, if you have an idea of what your ideal, your best version of the club would be, then you can work towards achieving that. So some people would prefer to have a small club full of very dedicated people. Some people would prefer to have large clubs and they don't mind if people drop in and out. Other people would prefer to have very, very competition-focused clubs, or very history-focused clubs, or perhaps reenactment-focused clubs, or whatever. If you know what you want to have as the club, if you know what you want to get out of it, you will be able to make that happen. Then it's a matter of advertising that. So maybe it's not a good idea, if you're a very tournament-focused club, to show all the books which are relevant to what you do, because maybe you don't use so many books in your regular teaching. The other side of it is if you're very focused on history and working with the books, maybe don't push the tournament angle. Or if you only ever wear spes protective gear, don't turn up and try to dress up in historical clothing.
Yep.
If you advertise what it is that you do and showcase the club that you are or that you want to be, there's a much better chance that the people who are interested in that will join you and will stay. If you try to advertise a club that you are not actually, then you might get the wrong people joining because they're interested in this other thing, but you don't actually do it. And then they'll probably leave because you're not the club that they thought they were joining. So having a good idea of what you want the club to be, and then showcasing that and nothing else, is probably one of the biggest bits of advice I could offer.
Siempre te estuviste atraído por la idea desde el principio de dar clase, desde que empezaste con la HEMA. Were you attracted by the idea of teaching from the beginning when you first started doing HEMA?
Not particularly. When I started doing HEMA, I had already been teaching karate for a few years, and I just wanted to learn something about fighting with swords. So when I first came across the club that was playing with swords, I wasn't looking to become an instructor. I ended up becoming one of the instructors, but it wasn't the idea of teaching which I was enthusiastic about at the very beginning.
Y por la idea de dar clase a un grupo nuevo desde el principio, and by the idea of teaching a new group from the very beginning again?
Yes, that did excite me. When I was teaching in Glasgow, I made so many different interpretations and understandings of all the material, and I made a lot of mistakes along the way. I thought that this meant one thing, and now I think something entirely different. Starting a new club meant that we could start from a clean sheet. We didn't have any background in older interpretations or different ways of doing things, or ways that I had tried to grow out of doing things. We just had opportunity. So I was really quite excited about having a fresh group of people who would be interested in starting from the very beginning. And I was quite excited to give them their first few sessions and their first introduction.
Vuestro club, ¿cuáles son las armas principales de estudio y qué tratados o corrientes seguís? At the club, what are your main weapons for study and what treatises do you follow?
We are a longsword club. We really just focus on longsword. Unfortunately, we've only had one evening a week when we could train, so I decided it was best to focus rather than trying to do too many things and get distracted by all the shiny swords. It would be more efficient just to pick one thing. So we do longsword, specifically the 16th century German common fencing, because I find that quite interesting. So we use things like the Kulnerfecht book. We use the treatise by Andre Parenfiend. We work with Joachim Meyer, Paulus Meyer. These are probably the main sources that we use, but I draw from an awful lot of the 16th century sources to try to create my understanding of what I think the common fencing was at the time. This is also one of the reasons why I was quite excited to start a new club from the very beginning when I moved down from Glasgow, because in Glasgow I'd always taught Lichtenauer.
Mm-hmm.
And starting again in Liverpool, not only was it a fresh club, it was also a fresh subject. It was common fencing instead of Lichtenauer again.
¿Cuál es la estructura de un entrenamiento normal en tu club? What is the structure in a regular training day in your club?
So we only have one session a week. I want to make the most of it. So we start with a quick warm-up. We don't run around or do push-ups or anything like that. We just get the swords in hand and we start cutting. We make big shapes in the air with the swords, and this is quite a good warm-up. It also moves very neatly into working on maybe some of the technical details of some of these techniques, maybe some of the footwork, all that sort of thing. So the warm-up becomes a session going over the fundamentals of something or another. From there, we usually follow the theme set by the warm-up and the fundamentals, and we will work towards achieving a particular goal, a particular skill by the end of the session. We'll do that with maybe solo exercises or paired exercises with a partner. We might even do group exercises with 3 or 4 people. And we start with things that are really, really simple. My goal is that anyone could join any of my sessions, even if it was the very first time they had picked up a sword. And even if I want to work on something a bit more complicated, I want anyone to be able to walk in off the street and take part in the session. Over the course of the lesson, we will build it up. We will add complexity. We'll make it that little bit more difficult step by step. And that means that the people who are still beginners are slowly increasing their skill without feeling that they're getting lost. But also for the people who are more experienced, they have time to work on their basics, to practice their fundamentals again, but also get plenty of information about the next steps they need to make their performance better. Mm-hmm. And that's really what we do in most of the session. We don't do a lot of sparring at our regular sessions because there's not a lot of time. I'd rather we worked on the drills and the training. We do try and organise a weekend sparring afternoon on a monthly basis, just so that there's some opportunity to do that. Again, by separating the regular training and the sparring day, I find that's quite beneficial because it means everyone gets at least some practice before they start doing sparring. And it means if several new people just walk in for their first session, it doesn't make my life difficult trying to juggle experienced people and new people and sparring.
Yep.
So a lot of this is designed to make my life easier while giving quite a well-structured and quite a helpful progress or method of progressing for the club members.
How long is a session?
So our regular sessions during the week are 2 hours.
Well,
the afternoon sparring days are usually somewhere between 3 and 4-ish hours. Really, it depends how much time the hall is able to give us.
¿Cómo habéis pasado la cuarentena en el club y si has hecho algunas clases online? How did you pass the quarantine as a club? And did you make online classes for the club?
We started off by just taking a break, mainly because everyone was trying to work out how to do the whole quarantine lockdown thing.
Yeah.
Everyone was trying to come to terms with it and trying to come to terms with how they would keep things going in their lives. So maybe for a month or so, we didn't really do anything. And then we started doing a weekly online class through Zoom instead of our meeting in person. So we do it at the same time every week on the same day. So most people have that in their schedule. And we talk a little bit about maybe some of the history associated with what we study. We talk about the source material. We talk about some of my thoughts about HEMA. We then we'll maybe do that for 40 minutes to an hour. We'll then take 30 or 40 minutes. We'll do some physical exercises, maybe not with sword in hand, because not all of us have big rooms. We don't have big training spaces. Certainly, I've got quite a small room, and there's a light right up there. And if I don't want to break it. So we do things identifying muscle groups that are very important for our fencing, and we do exercises to help those muscle groups, or perhaps we look at stability around the joints or whatever. And then after we've done that, we usually just have a brief chat, take questions about the things we've been talking about, and then we crack open some beer and we hang out a little.
Yeah, it's perfect. Eres uno de los instructores más prolíficos, sobre todo online. Tu blog tiene muchos artículos interesantes. ¿Cuál es tu inspiración? You are one of the more prolific online instructors. Your blog has a lot of interesting articles. What is your inspiration?
Mainly, I just have thoughts about a lot of things. I have thoughts about the books and the sources that I'm reading. I have thoughts about how to communicate that material to people. I have thoughts about how to run a club. I have thoughts about equipment. I have quite a lot of thoughts. I think most instructors have quite a lot of thoughts at any given time. We're always usually thinking about something, and that's a great source of inspiration. If you have a thought and it's the sort of thing that you might chat with someone about for 5 or 10 minutes in the pub, or waiting to get into the hall to start a lesson, or whatever, that's a great topic for writing a short article. But I find that writing articles, it can be a case of writing something that will help other people. It can also be a case of, I have these thoughts, I'm not quite sure exactly what I'm thinking, so I start writing and trying to get my thoughts into an article, trying to write them down. It clarifies these thoughts for me, and I come to a much better understanding of whatever it is I've been thinking about. So I do it for quite a selfish purpose. It helps me think. It helps me understand what I'm considering, and it also helps other people. So it makes me happy when people get in touch and they say that they've been reading one of the articles and it's helped them through something.
Yeah.
So if I can write these articles and help myself and help other people at the same time, that seems like a win-win situation.
It's perfect, yeah. ¿Esperabas el éxito que ha tenido tu guía de estudio de espada larga? Did you expect the success of your book, German Lonsword Study Guide?
The German Longsword Study Guide. When my co-writer and I were working on it, we had no idea it would be successful. We spent about 3.5 years working on it between 2010 and 2013. We published towards the end of 2013. And to be honest, we weren't expecting very many sales at all. We thought it would just be a useful sort of thing for our students, and maybe some other people would buy it. But it's been our best-selling book ever since. I would probably write it differently now if I were to do it again. But of course, because I have so many more years of experience and knowledge and understanding, and also much more practice at writing books and writing articles and things to communicate information to people. But I still think it holds up well. And one of the reasons that we chose to write it the way we did, we wanted to base it on what the sources said, and we wanted to avoid putting much interpretation into it. And because of that, I think it can still be useful for people, even though our interpretations have changed so many times. It's not like Ringek is going to wake up tomorrow and decide he understands the Krumpau differently. So because we just focus on what the sources said without putting interpretation in there, it can still be useful, I think.
¿Cómo nació Fallen Rook? How was the Fallen Rook publication born?
Well, we were publishing this study guide anyway. We were really just doing it as a project to help our own students.
Hey.
And we thought it might be useful to be able to write some other study guides as well, or make some other materials. And if we were going to be making a variety of different materials, then it would be neat and tidy to have a publishing house for that. And if we had a brand name attached to it, then that would help to differentiate our books from the various other books that might be on the market. So we decided we'd call it Fallen Rook Publishing. We'd have a go at it and see how it went. And it's been going pretty well.
Hace poco escribiste un artículo de que volvías a las clases de karate porque necesitabas ser estudiante de nuevo. ¿Cuál piensas que es la razón? Recently, I read that you come back to karate classes because you need to be a student again after so many years as an instructor in HEMA. Other instructors here in Spain told me the same. What do you think would be the reason?
It's difficult to be an instructor.
Yeah.
There's a lot of thinking required. There's a lot of trying to understand things. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of responsibility. It's nice just to go somewhere and not worry about that. Just turn up and have the instructor in that club tell you what to do, and you just do it. But also because I had the experience of karate in the past, the club that I'm going to now, it's a different system of karate. It's similar enough that I recognize most of the terminology, I recognize most of the techniques and the shapes, I recognize a lot of the katas, but it's different enough that I'm doing almost everything wrong. And it's quite challenging to overcome 14 years of muscle memory and to try to adapt everything so that it's now correct according to a different system. So I've taken this on as a challenge for myself, as well as enjoying just getting the practice. The karate is a very beneficial martial art to practice. It's very good for the body. And it's nice just to be doing that kind of movement again. It's nice to be a student in someone else's club. But it's also given me a very difficult challenge to try to adapt everything that I learned previously and tweak it just a little, enough for it to be correct according to this system. Some things are falling into place very, very easily, and some things are just taking time. It's quite frustrating.
Yeah. When you teach in your club, you have a whole year classes in your mind, or maybe you change some things, or
I used to make a curriculum, a plan for a series of lessons, but I stopped doing that after a while. I just have an idea for a session. You know, for example, tonight's session is going to focus on doing our footwork better, or on doing the Zerhau better, or it's going to be more about different ways to solve the problem of someone putting their sword in your face, something like that. And when I have a statement like that to describe what the class is going to be about, I just make exercises to achieve that goal. And this gives me quite a lot of freedom, because I can modify it quite easily depending on who is present. If for whatever reason it's mostly experienced people, then I can increase the complexity. I can dial it up and make it much more useful for them. If it's mostly beginners, then I can dial it down. I can make it a lot simpler, or maybe a more general introduction to sorts of things. Maybe if we sometimes do little arcs of lessons, maybe we follow a vague theme for 3 or 4 weeks as we explore related issues around it, and then we'll move to something else. You know, because of the structure of our lessons, it always starts simple and slowly builds up to something more complicated. It's not a problem at all to have a different topic every single week, because every lesson can be almost like a small self-contained workshop on that topic. And as long as the themes of the lessons work well together, and they don't clash awkwardly, they flow reasonably neatly from one to the next, it works well. I would always encourage people who are new to being instructors to write lesson plans and to have a curriculum of maybe 6 lessons in a row or whatever, because that's good practice in thinking ahead and in setting goals for yourself and in trying to work out what needs to be taught first before something else can be taught. By practicing that, using lesson plans and writing up curricula, someone can become quite a good instructor. Once you've got those skills, you don't need to write the plans anymore. You can just do it off the top of your head. But that skill comes with practice. So I would always recommend that people make their plans and write things down in the beginning, and until you feel comfortable just walking in and teaching something.
Has estado, que recuerde, por lo menos 3 veces en España, la primera hace casi 10 años. ¿Cómo ves la evolución de la esgrima en España? Es muy distinta al norte de Europa. You have here in Spain, I think, 3 times?
I think so, yes. Yes.
Yeah. First time with us in La Coruña, I think 10 years ago now, more or less.
Quite 10 years, but maybe 7 years ago. It's been quite a long time.
Yeah, I try to thought and I say, whoa, a lot of time. And
it has been, I still have a lot of fond memories of that event.
Thank you. We too. And how do you think or about Spanish fencing or the evolution in the events you can stay here?
I think that's a good question. It's quite an interesting one, because every country, the HEMA scene within every country develops quite differently. And in Spain, it seems that you've been able to organize the practice of HEMA very well, much better than in the UK. You have quite useful federations and structures to help clubs work together.
Yeah.
and therefore you have quite a lot of events that bring people together. I think my perception is, at least, that is still the case. I see a lot of advertisements for Spanish events which bring together clubs to do things. Unfortunately, in the UK at the moment, most events that are happening are really just tournaments. There's not very many opportunities to get together to do lessons or just training. So my perception is that Spain still has more of these teaching and training events, which is a wonderful thing. I think there are a lot of really skillful Spanish fencers. It's always a joy to watch. Lots of you. The focus is perhaps a bit different from the focus in other places. And perhaps the way that some of you go about doing the practice is a bit different as well. Perhaps in some places in Spain, there's a bit more emphasis on doing things with minimal gear instead of padding up with all the protection, which makes sense if it's such a hot place to live.
Yeah.
No problems at all with that. Perhaps sometimes the focus is a bit more on just playing with the fencing, or keeping it light contact, or keeping it friendly, or maybe making some of the practice of longsword or sword and buckler a bit more like rapier or such like. But that's fine. Every HEMA scene in every country has a different focus. There might even be several focuses within the same country, because clubs in different areas or just different people are interested in different things, and they're interested in doing things differently. I think it can often be quite easy to recognize Spanish fencers at events, and sometimes it's because of the style of the equipment that some of the Spanish clubs wear. Sometimes it's just how people move. But it's always quite interesting, I find, when I go to events, to look at people if I don't know them and try and work out where are they probably from.
Yeah, I like to do the same. Yeah, it's quite, yeah. I don't know if you want to say something as a conclusion, or something you would like to talk about, or promotion or something.
Well, I'd take the last question you asked and give it to you. What do you think the Spanish HEMA clubs are doing well in the last year or so?
I think we are more in Spain. We have two different big groups, and I think we are more unit than in the past.
That's
and
excellent.
And I think it's very important, because we can grow up together and changing our proper minds and the ways to fence and to teach. And I think it's important for grow up. We have a lot of clubs now in Spain, and I think more people are more opportunity to fence, and other clubs are making little events, but you can go and sparring with them and learn with some sparring to another people. And I think it's very interesting. We are starting to make some tournaments too, because we think that we have to give all fencers the opportunity to spar with adrenaline and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And we have some events for lessons and teaching, and some events for tournament, and I think that that is great.
Well, that sounds very good. Having a well unified scene is what we should all be working towards, I think. when a country, when the clubs in a country are divided and they don't really work together, then it's very hard for people to get better. If people are working together, then it's so much easier to learn things, to meet new people. That's good.
I would like to say thank you to you to pass some time with us.
Welcome.
It's very interesting always to chat or to speak to you. And thank you very much, Farrel. I hope I see you again soon, or I don't know when exactly because of all of this, but I hope it's soon.
Yes, I look forward to it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, take care.
Take care too. Bye. Bye.